What is up, Bills Mafia? Matt Parrino, Ryan Talbot here with you. I am inside the press box at Highmark Stadium, just hours after the end of practice over at the training facility here in Orchard Park. This is Shout, a Buffalo Bills football podcast, and I thought, hey, let's mix it up a little bit here today, Ryan Talbot. Let's do an early afternoon show. Get to you guys a little bit quicker and mix up these times a little bit. How are you, my friend?
Hey, I'm doing great. Yeah, excited to do a afternoon show. It's great to see you there at the stadium, and it sounds like it was quite the practice today.
It was a great practice, and I was a little bit worried about today. I was like, when I found out that the pads were coming on tomorrow, Tuesday, I'm like, oh man, this might be a little bit of a snoozer here as we kind of wait for that last big day before the pads come on. But I got to say, the intensity was really high today. I think there was a lot of takeaways. I just got up my observation story on the site. So if you want to check that out and read along as we're live here, Syracuse.com, NewYorkUpstate.com, those are there for you. And some extra tidbits that I didn't even get in there that we'll talk about on the show today. But Shout a Bills football podcast is brought to you by Tops Friendly Markets, your neighborhood store with more. Tops, spend more time enjoying everything that summer has to offer and less time worrying about getting to the store with Tops Pickup and Delivery. Shop for your groceries online, choose Pickup Delivery. Tops will bring the groceries right to you. Visit topsmarkets.com to get started. And Ryan, you've combed through my observations. Where would you like to start, my friend?
Well, let's start with Josh Allen, just because there was a little bit, I wouldn't say anyone hit the panic button, but there were some fans upset on Saturday when we said it was his worst training camp practice to date. And boy, it sounds like he bounced back pretty nicely today, was sharp once again. So why don't we start there, man? Tell us a little bit about Josh Allen's day.
Yeah, that's a good place to start. Whenever it's about Josh Allen, I think people want to hear about it. And I think one of the big, you just talk about the variables. Stephon Diggs was back on the field today. I think that was a big piece of it. I mean, the guy, when he's out there, it just changes everything for the defense. I thought a lot of matchups today with Levi Wallace, which I thought was interesting, Stephon Diggs specifically. But, Josh Allen was he was deliberate today. He was getting, to the line of scrimmage. He was getting in and out of the huddle, and he was very deliberate with what he was doing. I think I wrote he threw a pass away, and I went back through my notes and tried to chart it as best I can. And this isn't like super official, like the NFL News wire stats during a game, but I'm pretty sure there was a couple sacks in there. He went 17 straight passing attempts with a completion, which even if it wasn't that, even if there was a miss in there that I didn't mark properly, or that's just kind of trying to paint a picture for how on the money he was today. He was getting the ball to Cole Beasley early and often. And, Cole Beasley is a matchup nightmare. I mean, he is a guarantee, especially in this environment without pads out there and not really being able to hit the same way. I mean, he is just able to get open so quickly, and they were getting the ball out to him pretty regularly. And he was in the action. Gabriel Davis was in the action. The one guy that wasn't in the action was Emmanuel Sanders. We saw him on Saturday coming out of team drills, and he didn't return. Well, he didn't participate in any team drills today.
Yeah, and that's interesting because after Saturday, he wasn't on the injury report. So it's just something to monitor. It might be something minor that they're just kind of holding off on, or he just might be getting a veteran rest day today, and maybe he only had to practice a little bit on Saturday. Who knows? We'll kind of wait and see on that. But yeah, Gabriel Davis sounds like he had a nice day. I think you mentioned Jake Kumaro in there a few times as well, Cole Beasley. But you also mentioned something else, Matt. You said there were a few sacks mixed in. Let's pivot over to the defensive side of the ball. And who was really flashing on defense today in terms of getting after the quarterback?
Today's practice, if I was listing who impressed me the most, I would start with AJ Epenesa. And I think both of his sacks, my notes were a little bit hazy, but I think both of them came against Spencer Brown, who had a tough day, and we'll talk about him in a little while. But AJ Epenesa, what's impressing me so much about him, and this goes back to the spring, is how he's winning. And this isn't like how he was billed coming out of Iowa. I mean, the quickness around the edge. I mean, he is absolutely, shredding some of these matchups because of the fact that offensive linemen aren't able to keep up with him. They're not able to get to their spot quick enough. And he's bending around the edge. He has this really nice combination of speed, quickness, but also still has a lot of that power. And that's where I think that you have to be the most excited if you're a Bills fan and this coaching staff who now has this defensive line unit. It's a whole, right? With Star Lotulelei back in the mix, I think you're going to be a lot happier with what you have size-wise on the interior. You were listening to Brandon Beane. You were going through his press conference before the show, and he talked specifically about the fact that, yeah, it's true. We didn't have a lot of, we weren't as big on the defensive line as we probably needed to be last year. Having him back, and some of these other guys like Efe Obada, another guy today who had another sack. He is piling good days on good days and continuing to show off. Greg Rousseau, again today, there were two specific plays. One was a sack where he beat Darrell Williams, I believe, with an outside move. And then a few plays later, it was an inside move where he really showed the quickness of his feet, got inside. It wasn't a sack, but he applied the kind of pressure that, frustrates quarterbacks. And, with the quickness that they now have in the lane, they're going to be able to run a lot of these 2-man and even 4-man games to get pressure where I think Sean McDermott, if he were to be honest with an answer, would say where he really wants it. And that is right up in the middle, up in the quarterback's face. And I think they're going to be able to do a lot better job of that this year, consistently with the size now that they have in the exterior.
Yeah, and listen, last year, Star Lotulelei opting out, that kind of made a lot of players on the inside have to move to roles that maybe they weren't comfortable with at all times, playing out of position. It led to a lot of issues in the middle of that defense. And then on the ends, there was some pressure, but maybe the sacks weren't getting there. It's really encouraging right now through day 5 of training camp that once again, we're sitting here talking about young defensive ends. Greg Rousseau has popped almost every single day so far. AJ Epenesa. It's not just great for the Bills in 2021. It's great for them in 2022 and beyond because they have 2 very good veterans on this roster this year in Jerry Hughes and Mario Addison, but both players are earning the final year of their contract. Both players are over 30 years old. So hearing these 2 guys are playing so well, so consistently, it says that maybe the Bills have a bright future there as well after those 2 veterans leave. And going really quickly to Epenesa, we remember last year with Leslie Frazier saying, hey, we asked him to trim down. We knew he had the power, but we wanted to see if it would help him in terms of coming off the edge if he shed his weight down to about 260. And he said, we're benefiting from him playing at this weight now. And we're starting to see that again this season. So he had a full offseason probably in around the 250s, 260 range, where he was really able to work on his pass rush arsenal, really able to kind of get used to having that body frame after playing around 280 in college. So that's encouraging. Rousseau is encouraging. And you mentioned Efe Obada as well. Brandon Beane had a lot of really good things to say about him today on WGR, talking about how Eric Washington talked about his work ethic, what a great player he was, putting in the work. And that was one of the reasons they brought him in, and how encouraged they are with what they've seen from him and the fact that he can also contribute on the inside in terms of pushing the quarterback out of his place, making him uncomfortable. So really interesting to see, really interested to see what this defensive line can do this upcoming season when the pads are on in the preseason and, of course, in the regular season.
Mm-hmm. I've seen a lot of comments in here over the week and a half on the rookie tackles, and I think we can dive into them a little bit here today now. And I thought it was fitting that we got a chance to talk to Mitch Morse today. I mean, really the elder statesman of that offensive line, definitely the highest paid and the most, team leader, a guy that, Josh Allen has talked about, Sean McDermott has talked about what he brings in the room. And for 2 young guys like Tommy Doyle and Spencer Brown, I mean, a guy that, is probably going to be a sounding board for 2 young players that are trying to figure it out as they go. And he told a story today, a couple stories. He started off his press conference talking about Therese Paller, and it's made its way around social media. I mentioned him on the show last week, and man, it's sad to start a football season without Therese Paller. I would have loved to have him on here and talk about, we had him on right before the Chiefs game, and to kind of talk about, the moves that the Bill. He had such great insight, such a sad loss for the football world. But Mitch talked about him a little bit today. I thought that was awesome. And he also told a story about when he was a rookie and when he showed up to training camp and Andy Reid was his coach in Kansas City and he got thrown right into the fire. And it's a sink or swim type of situation. Coaches at this level with teams that are ascending, that are playoff caliber teams, and in this case, a championship caliber team, if you're going to make this roster, you're going to have to prove that if you're out there, you're going to be able to play. And, Spencer Brown's a guy that's gotten thrown out there and has been in a lot of interesting situations here early on in training camp. And I thought today it was just a situation where a young rookie just, got it handed to him a little bit. He lost a couple matchups against Epenesa. He looked like he was, struggling a little bit at times. But there's going to be those days, and I think that you could take those struggles and build on them moving forward. And those kinds of days in camp are going to lead to maybe better days, maybe in preseason games or regular season games should he make the roster.
Yeah, throwing him out into the fire, so to speak, is exactly what you want to do with Spencer Brown, because realistically, there's a good chance he's going to be your swing tackle in 2021, which also means you're one injury away from having him in a starting role. The athleticism is there. There's no denying that. The size is obviously there. Many Bills players have just talked about how gigantic these two offensive tackles are that they drafted. But he's ahead of, obviously, Tommy Doyle in terms of the movement skills, in terms of what we've seen so far. And I really think that a day like today where he does get beat a few times on sacks, it's not something to worry about. It's not something that fans should be stressed about. That's what happens to rookies. Rookies have those moments. They have those days where, simply put, they are beat. We've seen it at almost every position. A rookie cornerback comes in, they have a bad day, they get beat by opposing wide receivers. So offensive tackles, same type of deal. Wouldn't worry too much about Spencer Brown. Really like that upside, as do the Bills. And I think that when it's all said and done, he's going to be a player that has a big role here in this upcoming season.
Yeah, and I definitely want to emphasize that I think Spencer Brown is definitely further along than Tommy Doyle. I think that there's, it's looked like two different levels of readiness when watching the two of them play. I noted they were doing some one-on-one work, and Epenesa he went up against Doyle in the one-on-one work, and he just pushed him right back. So talking about the speed in the team drills, in the one-on-one drill, you really saw the physicality, his ability to, move a very big man at 6'8", 320 pounds for Doyle. So that's going to be fun to watch. And again, the pads aren't on yet. So I want to temper all of this by saying that we got a ways to go here until we get to a preseason game next week, so on and so forth. One other note on the offensive line before we move on, a guy that I just think that an afterthought going into to camp, I thought one of the sacks that you probably put on Brown, I think you got to kind of pair with Jamil Douglas, who a guy with Ike Bucker out of the mix has also gotten an uptick in his, looks to this coaching staff. And, a guy in Jamil Douglas is going to be a fun guy to watch because he probably get a lot of time in this preseason, played the last 2 years in Tennessee, 2 before that in Miami, and no real big splash plays. I think actually Effie Obata absolutely destroyed poor Jamil in the one-on-ones. It was a mismatch of epic proportions. And but somebody that as the pads come on, he's going to get a good long look. And with Ike Bucker, who returned to practice today, he didn't practice, but he was out on the field today, which is a good indication that he's making his way through protocols here. That was something of note. And I also would like to, while we're here, I'll go through some of the one-on-one matchups today that we're able to see. Jordan Devy struggled against Justin Zimmer, who absolutely blew by him in the one-on-ones. I wrote that down and I remember it pretty good. Daryl Johnson struggled in his rep against Steven Gonzalez. And then great battle between Gonzalez and Harrison Phillips. Also, Mario Addison schooled Tommy Doyle a little bit too, which is good. You want to see the vets, out there showing the young guys what's going on. All right, take us to the next point here, Ryan. What else do you want to talk about?
Well, real quick, because I want to talk real quick on Zimmer. I was standing next to you on Saturday, and I was just blown away with his athleticism on one play. So it's interesting because there's players on both sides of that line that maybe we're not discussing every single day because there's not consistent big plays left and right. But a guy like Zimmer flashes every now and then, and we saw it last year, the big play he had in the New England game. So he's going to be a guy that's right in there for a mix. When you're talking about the offensive linemen, Jameel Douglas, Forrest Lamp, those are guys that are competing for depth roles on this team most likely because they like Cody Ford, and Ford's had some really nice days. They like Feliciano, and it's going to be important for these guys, like you said, when the pads come on, when the preseason hits, for them to really shine, because if the Bills are smart, most of those starting players are not going to see significant time in those preseason games. So I think the Bills are in a really good spot where they're going to have a great chance to evaluate where their depth players are. Going on from your observations, who left practice today? Did anyone leave practice? I believe you mentioned Feliciano for left practice today.
Yeah, so Feliciano looked like he got dinged up a little bit at one point, and he left practice, and I don't think he returned. It was kind of towards the more end of practice, so who knows if he could have gone back out there. But with pads going on tomorrow, I'm sure he probably didn't. We haven't gotten a injury report from the Bills yet, so definitely, keep it. If we get it during the show, I'll definitely update everybody. If not, keep an eye on social media. And then Forrest Lamp did not practice today, was working off to the side he was on the bike at the beginning of practice and then kind of just watching. So maybe a small injury for him. We'll see, or large. We'll see. We don't know yet where he stands. I'm trying to think if there was anybody. I mentioned Bucker. Some moving parts in the offensive line. And obviously Sanders, who I mentioned, that didn't take part in team drills today.
So now changing or shifting gears here for a second, you did mention Devin Singletary in your observation piece, executing on the details. So why don't you tell us and walk us through that a little bit about his day today?
Yeah, I'm trying to I told you guys I wanted to bring you guys some video from practice here, but I was going so fast that I didn't have a time to download it. Let me see if I can bring it up here real quick because I wanted to get it on here. You read about it, Ryan. Like, tell people a little bit about it while I try to find it.
Yeah, absolutely. So you mentioned that Dable was working specifically with Singletary and Moss on their hands today, working out of the backfield. And we saw that a little bit last year where there were some struggles in terms of the chemistry between Josh Allen and the backs, getting them the ball. Singletary dropping some passes, obviously one in the championship game. So it kind of just sounds like he's starting to improve maybe in the reception area. He had a really good catch today, you noted. So it's a promising sign because I don't think the Bills, as they've said, are going to come out and have a true number one running back on this team. It's going to be who has the hot hand, who makes the most of their opportunities. And Singletary coming in with more muscle on his frame, improving in these little areas where there were some struggles in the past. It sounds like it was a promising day for the third-year running back out of FAU.
Yeah, and I really do like both of these guys' attitude in terms of Moss and Singletary, two guys that I think probably heard a lot of this stuff in the offseason and come in here with a really great attitude. And Singletary said today that it doesn't matter to me who ends up being the starting running back. It could be me, it could be Zach, it could be Matt Breida. We're going to show up and we're going to show out, and I just want to win a Super Bowl. And that's kind of been the the tone of a lot of different things. I mean, we go back to the Dane Jackson and Levi Wallace conversations last week, and I got the sense that both of those guys had a similar attitude. Listen, like, it's going to be a battle, and both of them want to be on the field, but I think that they know that in a year like this with a team like this, guys have to be, understanding that you don't want to be a distraction. So I got the video here. So let me download it real quick, and I'm going to talk to you a little bit about why I took it and why I found it interesting. So at the beginning of practice, Brian Dable, Leslie Frazier, Sean McDermott, they kind of make their way around practice, go group to group, sometimes just watching. But today I felt like it was noteworthy that Brian Dable was working specifically with Singletary and Moss. I mean, he was in the mix of it. He was actually running the little drill that he had them going through. He was having them kind of work on their hands, but also their timing and their vision. He'd start with their one their chin over their one shoulder, and as he's throwing it, they'd have to switch and readjust and get their hand to the other shoulder to try to make the catch. And he was working with them for a good solid 5 to 10 minutes before practice. Then you saw in the practice itself, Devin Singletary go out there and make a big play in the passing game. The block set up perfectly for him. He made a grab and he ran and, weaving through traffic. And that's the stuff that I feel like going back to his rookie year, I really expected that from Devin Singletary. I expected him to be a real, problem causer in the passing game because of the way that he moves with the ball in his hands. He's so shifty. He's able to kind of break tackles. He's able to make guys miss. And if you can get the ball to him in space, I think one of the things where he struggled last year is it was such a slog in the middle of the line at times that he wasn't able to really get out in space and attack defenses. And that, if you can get him the ball in the passing game, that's where I think it can be fun. Here's the video. Let's take a look at it real quick.
Unless Trubisky.
All right. So some sights and sounds out on the practice field today. And, this is something that I think a lot of fans would be able to see if we were in Rochester. But since we're not, I want to kind of bring some of that to the show. If you guys like it, if you don't, comment, show us in the comment section. But yeah, that was Devin Singletary and Zach Moss. Their confidence level going into this season is going to be really important, and Matt Parrino as well, because they're going to, they're going to want them to be a big part of what they do on offense.
Absolutely. And while there might be some games where they lean on the run a little bit, this is not a run-first team. This is not a team that runs the ball significantly. So getting them involved in the passing game is important. So a drill like that where they have to adjust on the fly in terms of turning their head and making little movements like that could pay dividends later on in this season, where they make a big catch down the sideline or they catch a screen and go downfield with it. So it's just the little things like that that kind of can go a long way for these backs in terms of making an impact in 2021. Now, Matt, you also mentioned Mitch Trubisky today. It sounds like he had at least one really good throw. So why don't you walk us through that and his overall day?
It was a tale of two different highs, the high of an electric play and then the high of just a really bad 4-play series for Mitch. That wasn't really all on him, and I'll go to my notes for that part. But let's start with the throw. It was early on in practice, and it was a really scintillating moment because, look, Mitchell Trubisky is a guy that, going back to the spring, watching him up close and personal now for, I'd say, maybe like a dozen practices, he's a guy that he works in that short to intermediate area of the field. I mean, he likes to check down. It's just the style that he kind of brings. And I think that what we've been seeing over the last couple of days is Trubisky start to get a little bit more comfortable, take a couple more chances. We heard from Sean McDermott or from Josh Allen about the relationship that they've started to build, and you're seeing the confidence kind of level go up a little bit. I think Mitch has looked really good at times. Sometimes we'll be standing off to the side watching them warm up, throwing in the nets, and Trubisky is on the money. I mean, he is hitting on the run throws, putting it right on the target, right in the hitting the targets in the net. And today it was, if not for the Josh Allen dime to Cole Beasley, and we could talk about that a little bit. I don't know if we actually went into detail on that play. It's worth mentioning, and I'll talk about it after this. Trubisky had the throw of his training camp. He had some time. He let the play develop, and then he just uncorked a bomb. And it was almost like you kind of sit back and be like, wait a second, who's playing quarterback right back there? At first I thought it might have been Jake Fromm, and I was like, no, I don't think that's Jake Fromm. Mitchell Trubisky just threw a beautiful long ball, go ball, to Isaiah Hodgins, who was being covered by Dane Jackson. And listen, the only person that can make a play on the ball was Isaiah Hodgins, he made a play. He hit him in stride. Josh Thomas tried to come over at the last minute and try to apply some pressure, but it wasn't to be. And those are the kind of things where you're sitting there and saying, man, the Bills are in really good shape. If something does happen to Josh Allen, to have a guy in Mitchell Trubisky who has all the starting experience, but can, from just what I'm watching out here, and pads aren't on yet, he can make some throws.
Yeah, and you're right. It can be deceiving when you get used to seeing someone throw short, intermediate all the time. When he finally uncorks one, you have to almost double check to see who it was. But sounds like that was a great throw. Really good news also for Isaiah Hodgins, because he had been a little bit quiet recently, and he's still in the mix for one of those wide receiver jobs. If they're keeping 6, he could be in the mix for that. If they're keeping 7, obviously in the mix there as well. So it's good for him to make some plays too against Dane Jackson of all cornerbacks. And then you mentioned, though, that Trubisky faced some pressure as well on a series. So how was that?
Yeah, that was one of the more brutal stretches that I've seen for any quarterback. I mean, it was just like play after play after play. Josh Allen had a really nice series where he hit Diggs for a couple balls, hit Cole Beasley, and then Trubisky came on the first play of that series. Carlos Boogie Basham is able to apply pressure, ended up being incomplete, where he absolutely, abused Bobby Hart. I thought it was a really bad rep for Bobby Hart, but a great one for Boogie Basham. And if you're a Bills fan, you probably like hearing that. The next play, Trubisky feeling a little bit more pressure. Sarandino was able to break up a pass intended for Lenore, who, by the way, Lenore's had a sneaky, nice little training camp. I've liked a couple of things that I've seen from him as well. We'll talk more about him in future episodes. Then Effie with a sack of Trubisky beats Tommy Doyle. Vernon Butler and Mike Love combined to force a little bit of pressure on the next play. The first real pop from Vernon Butler there. So just a series where Trubisky was dealing with a lot of pressure. I also mentioned Josh Allen. He had probably what I would still consider the throw of the day to Cole Beasley, where he sat in a pocket that was chaos was bubbling around him. I mean, he had Spencer Brown pushed up pretty close to him, who is huge, and dealing with the pressure in all different directions. He let the play develop, saw Cole Beasley on the left side pretty deep. I'd say 25, 30 yards, maybe about in that range down the field. And he just put a ball, dropped in a bucket, in stride, throwing to his left. It was just a perfectly placed ball where only Cole Beasley can catch it. I wish I almost had a different angle on it. And I'll be interested to see if the Bills put out a video clip of it later today, because it was just one of those special Josh Allen throws. Listen, we're brought to you by Tops Friendly Markets. Tops loves local. Tops is proud to partner with over 200 local growers to supply Tops with their freshest homegrown fruits and vegetables produced and picked this morning and be on your table tonight. What is next, Mr. Talbot? Actually, before we go any further, what is next is, how about some linebackers? I've seen some comments about linebackers the last couple of days. We had a special gentleman in the house today. Lorenzo Alexander made his return to One Bills Drive. He was coaching up the linebackers. Here's a little video clip from today. All right, so some good sights and sounds. A nice look up close and personal, the linebackers out of practice. But yeah, Lorenzo was pretty high. You can see that all the players were excited to have him back in the building. Guys he's played with and started with Tremaine Edmonds and Matt Milano and AJ Klein, who I'm sure that they're familiar with him. And Lorenzo was just all over practice today. But I think tomorrow is really setting up to be the day that we can really start to kind of sink our teeth into the linebackers. One guy, without going into too much detail, that's just kind of left me wanting more is Tyrell Adams, who I think coming into this stretch was somebody that to training camp was somebody that I had we talked about as a guy that could be a real nice addition for the Bills, not only on special teams where he plays, but as a depth linebacker. And I got a guy like maybe Andre Smith, who I think is trending, in a better direction. I feel like he's been more active. He's made more plays. But again, the pads aren't on yet. So we'll have to wait and see what happens once that starts.
Yeah, but encouraging to hear that the linebacker depth is performing well. Obviously, the Bills generally only have 2 on the field at most times in games, but to have people that are ready to go, ready to contribute, a tackling machine like Adams, who did just that last year with the Houston Texans, it's promising to know that there's depth across the board, especially at that linebacker position where we've seen the Bills get a little bit dinged up at times. We've seen Edmonds play through some injuries or play hurt a little bit. We've seen Milano miss action, so having some players waiting in the wings that can step up and contribute would really benefit this defense in 2021.
If you're watching on YouTube, we appreciate it. I am live. It's Matt Parrino and Ryan Talbot. I'm live at the stadium inside the press box, just a few short steps away from the training facility where the Bills held their 5th practice today. If you're watching on YouTube, hit that like button. Hit that subscribe button as well. If this is your first time here, we are going to be live every day after training camp practice to talk to you guys about what we saw, because Ryan will be back up here this weekend. I'm excited to do another 2-man, 1-man booth show that was really popular. I think people really got a kick out of it. How much fun did you have crammed in that little studio there, Ryan?
It was a really good time, and you're right. I mean, we were definitely squeezed in there pretty tightly, but it was a good time. It was a fun show. You're right. A lot of the comments seem to enjoy that aspect of it, so I am looking forward to being up there again this weekend, seeing another 15, 20,000 Bills fans in attendance. I know it's going to be rocking again, loud with the fans, loud with the music, and really excited to see what the Bills can do on both sides of the ball.
All right. Yes, sir. Oh, just subbed. I appreciate you. Anything else you want to cover here, Ryan? I think that I got to see if I empty the notebook here.
I saw some good questions in here. Well, first of all, someone said, any update on Antonio Williams? How's Antonio Williams looking in the running back race? Special teams, anything standing out to you from Antonio?
He's had a couple good days of practice where he's had a run or two that really popped me. I love the way that he's always just, every run he makes, it looks powerful. He had one today where he kind of fell, he kind of tried to make a cut, and I almost feel like he fell backwards. So not a great, one of the lone impressions he was able to make today. But listen, it's going to come down to those preseason games. He's got an uphill battle on his hands. I think that they really like what Matt Breida brings to the room. I think they like what he brings to the competition. And it doesn't matter who you ask, Zach Moss, Devin Singletary, Brian Dable, Sean McDermott. What does Matt Breida bring to this team? All 4 of them. Speed. One word answer.
But that is what they lacked last year. It was the talk of the season. It was the one issue that the Bills had at that running position in terms of the skill set that was missing. It wasn't the only issue with the running game last year, but it was the one skill set that was lacking. So to bring that in here, as long as Breida performs it as well as he has to date, he's definitely in the mix. But yeah, it could end up being a numbers game for Antonio Williams. I like the player. I think he's a fit for this team. If he doesn't make this main roster, they're going to try to get him on the practice squad, but there's a lot of people and a lot of teams that saw what he did in the regular season last year that might try to claim him and add him to their roster. So it's going to be interesting to see. And then I think I saw something in here about the offensive line, wanting to know, is it more so the defensive line that's performing above expectations, or is it a concern that maybe the offensive line is struggling a bit against some of these young pass rushers?
I think not having Deion Dawkins there is a big deal. I mean, this guy's been a staple on this offensive line, and you're working Cody. I will say this. I'm glad that's great questions, because you're bringing something up that I wanted to talk about. I see a fullback question too. Brian Dable had an interesting quote about Reggie Gilliam today, so we'll get to that as well. Let's start with, what I think Deion Dawkins means to this line. I mean, it's just so stabilizing for your offense to have a guy that you don't have to ever worry about at one of your bookends. And, I think that without pads, Darrell Williams has had his hands full at time, with Greg Rousseau. And it could be an issue of just getting into game shape. I mean, Gregory Rousseau has been absolutely getting after it since the beginning of May when he reported for Bills minicamp. So he's a young guy. He's got length. He's got power. And Darrell Williams is a veteran who just signed a 3-year contract who might be taking a little bit longer to get into game shape after, missing most of the spring. I think he came back for what was the last week of OTAs and minicamp. I'd have to go back and check the exact on that, but he wasn't here for all of it. So I just think the guys that have been here are probably a little bit closer to being in game shape, but we'll see how that all transpires. But one guy in particular that I think if you're a Bills fan, you have to be so excited about, and I know, preface it with the pads and all that kind of stuff. Cody Ford, man, like he had a couple plays today where he was really good and just really sound. I thought that there was one play where Gregory Rousseau, I think, had a nice inside move and had a free path to Allen, and Ford immediately picked him up and noticed it late and just used his lateral quickness just to put a body in front of Rousseau to stop his forward momentum that would have completely blown out the play. And those are I didn't write about that because I wrote about Ford in detail the other day. But those are big moments in practice where you're just like, okay, that's good news, because I think seeing this starting five at some point, whether it's in the preseason or week one, I think that's going to dictate a lot about how they're able to. I think they answered a lot of questions in pass pro with how good they were last year. Now it's about combining both of those two things, and having some continuity there is going to be important.
Yeah, and having guys like Feliciano and Ford, who are solid run blockers, could really help open up things for the running backs as well, while also helping the passing game continue to kind of hum along like it did 1 year ago. Brandon Beane has said for the past 2 seasons that he's a believer in Cody Ford, and it's just injuries and a little bit of bad luck that's kind of hampered his career to date. So it seems like this year, with his health being on the upswing, he's really putting together a strong camp so far. Like you've said, we'll see if that continues when the pads come on. It'll be very beneficial to the Bills if that does happen, because, then that's one less competition for them to worry about. They can kind of say, Ford's our guy at the one guard spot, and then it comes down to depth and competition. So good to hear that Ford is really on having a great camp so far and kind of moving in the right direction in terms of health, but also play.
So good question in here on do you see the Bills using fullback more this year than last? And, good timing, because we had Brian Dable this morning, and I specifically asked him about Reggie Gilliam, because I think it's so interesting the career arc so far for Gilliam. Start coming in as a fullback, working behind Patrick DeMarco, who obviously we talked to Patrick on the show last week. They worked a lot together before Patrick DeMarco was forced to retire. And, Gilliam has credited him with how, gracious he was in kind of giving him some mentoring. And before he left, they flipped him over to tight end to get him on the roster. Had that big touchdown catch as a tight end early last season. Everybody remembers. Went through the season, didn't have too much of an impact, didn't play a ton, played some special teams. But then, this offseason, he's being flipped back to fullback. And so I asked Brian Dable today, like, how do you view him? And, like, is he a guy that's going to be this versatile piece he can flip back and forth? And he basically said that in as many words. And here's his exact quote. He's versatile, like you said. We'll see. It'll be an important preseason for him, and he's done a good job in the kicking game. Figure out if he has a role here on offense, and that will be up to him, whether it's at fullback or moving around a little bit. But again, you credit Brandon and Joe Shane for finding guys like this that have qualities that we covet in terms of smart, tough, dependable. Then you let them go out there and show what they can do. You give them an opportunity to do it. And so, listen, I haven't seen a ton of Gilliam here the last couple of days. I've seen him here or there. I think we even noticed him together, Ryan, on Saturday on a play. He's going to have to make an impact, at fullback. He's going to have to make an impact as a run blocker, because I think that's something that they always valued in DeMarco. Standout special teamer, but also great as a lead blocker in that running game. And maybe that could be an area that they point to that, okay, let's get a fullback back in the mix, and that could maybe cure some of our ills in the running game.
Yeah, and Patrick DeMarco said it himself. The one thing that Gilliam has that he envied was those sticky hands. When he got his hands on you, you weren't going to be able to get away from him. He's going to drive you back, move you back. So now it's time for him to show that in the preseason. That's going to be his showcase, because the Bills are going to have so many tough decisions trimming that final roster down that Gilliam has to stand out almost every single preseason game, continue to make some plays at camp to find a spot on this roster, because they didn't really utilize a fullback last year. Maybe it's because they were expecting DeMarco to be there. And midseason, they said, okay, we're going to kind of, make Gilliam more of a hybrid type player between tight end and fullback. But I think fullback is where he's going to have to make that living. I'm not sure if the Bills can keep players solely for special teams play anymore, because he is great at blocking kicks. He was great at Toledo in that area. He is a great special teams player. But this is a team trying to win a Super Bowl. And when it comes down to it, they're going to have to make some really tough decisions, and Gilliam's going to be one of them at the end of the day.
Great comment here. Ma Bills 028 on YouTube said she's in here on YouTube after watching on Facebook. Listen, we love watching everybody on all platforms that are watching, and any way that you're able to get the Shout podcast, we recommend listening. But man, that YouTube comment section just hits a little bit differently. It's so active. It's so engaging. It's so thoughtful. I mean, you guys do a great job in the comment section. And sometimes me and Ryan will be halfway through the show. I'll have to double check back in with Ryan, because I'm just over here reading the comment section. You guys do a great job. You're big part of what makes this show so fun for us. So keep killing it. Great stuff as always today. I think that'll do it, Ryan. What final thought? Hit us with it.
Final thought, the pads are coming on tomorrow, Bills Mafia, so you don't have to hear Matt and I say when the pads come on anymore. Keep an eye on Matt's observations. This is where it starts to get good. This is where some competitions are really going to heat up on this team, and we're going to see who's standing out. So I know I'm really excited about seeing the players in pads. I'm sure you are too.
Oh my gosh, I cannot wait. Get ready for tomorrow. Carve out an hour. Make sure if you're on YouTube, set those notifications up. I'll put, like I did today, that initial time frame. We moved it back 10 minutes because I was I didn't finish. I wanted to finish observations before we got on there. So that'll move around a little bit tomorrow. Leave it in the comment section. DM me. What time do you guys want us to go live? We'll do it wherever works best for you. I know some people really love being a part of the live show, so I try to work it around what's best for you guys. We're kind of toying with different times, but tomorrow is going to be an exciting one. I'd imagine we'll be a little bit later tomorrow, maybe 3:30 or later. So stay tuned for that. We're so excited for it. Tomorrow's going to be an hour-long show, so buckle up. I'd imagine we're going to have a lot to talk about tomorrow. Shout Buffalo Bills Football Podcast brought to you by Tops Fresh Burger Bar, with over 30 varieties of beef, turkey, chicken, plant-based, and gourmet blend burgers ready to grill. Tops Fresh Burger Bar has you smiling all summer long. We're going to be smiling all week long because we got a lot of Bills football and a lot of Bills padded practices to talk about. This is the fun time of the year. Hit that like button. Make sure you subscribe. We will see you tomorrow.